All right. Well, we are going to go ahead and dive right in. We'll start with a quick word of prayer. Heavenly Father, we just thank you so much for this time that you've given us to be together. And Lord, we just ask that you would bless us as we seek to be better teachers and better understand the amazing gifts that you've given us. We just ask that you would give us wisdom, help us to teach our children and raise our children well. Amen. All right, so today we are talking about 3 learning styles myths. So just to give you a little bit of context, my name is Tyler Hogan. I'm the president of Bright Ideas Press. I'm a homeschool graduate, and I'm now homeschooling my 5 kiddos along with my wife, Helen, who's also a homeschool graduate. I wrote a book recently called Demystifying Learning Styles, and I did so because well, for 2 reasons. One, I wanted to better understand how to teach my own kids, better understand how kids learn, what makes information stick and make it really useful. And secondly, because we're a curriculum publishing company, I wanted to have some even better tools in my toolbox for writing good curriculum. So out of all of that study over the past year or so, I wrote Demystifying Learning Styles, and in the course of the research, I found some just really fantastic and fascinating studies on how we learn. And one of the things that I found out was that there's a lot of information out there on learning styles and on cognitive science. And in learning styles in particular, there's a lot of conflicting information, a lot of confusing information. And so a big part of the book is devoted to busting some of the common myths of learning styles. So this is the book right here, if you want to take a peek at it, Demystifying Learning Styles. And at the end of this little webinar, I'm going to give you guys a coupon code for a discount on it if you're so inclined. So I wanted to spend some time on these 3 myths in particular because I've found just in conversations with lots of homeschool parents that these are a few of the myths that are the most anxiety producing and the most challenging in our day-to-day lives and philosophy of education. So my hope is that by busting these myths, we'll be able to lead happier, easier, and more successful homeschools. So let's dive into myth number 1. Myth number 1 is we all learn differently. Now, there's an element of truth to that, and that's what makes a myth so so devious sometimes, is that there's just enough truth in that sentence to make us have some problems as we're trying to delve into it. But the reality is the basic building blocks of learning are the same for all of us. All of us learn in basically the same way. The way that our brain takes stimuli from our environment and turns that into usable, workable knowledge doesn't really have a lot of variance. Now, there's variance in the kinds of things that we'll pay attention to, in the kinds of prior learning that we've had, and in the ways, not so much in the ways that we encode, but what we choose to encode, and then what we choose to rehearse, and that all impacts how we recall information. But the process is the same amongst pretty much all of us. So the general idea of how we learn new information is lots of stimulus is coming into our 5 senses all the time, every day, and we pay attention to a select bit of that information. That's what attention is. It's like a filter. It takes all of the noise and the sights and the sounds and the smells and the physical sensation, and it decides which of those details is going to get put into my working memory so that I can mess around with this idea and work with it in my head. Then, whatever is currently in our working memory, we're going to take that and we're going to look at things we already know about the topic. That's called our prior learning, because none of us are blank slates unless we're a newborn baby. So we take our prior learning and we take our new information, and then we go through the process of encoding, which is, it's as if we have a big filing cabinet in our brains and all of our prior learning is there in folders. So we open it up and then we take this new information and we put it into the appropriate folder. That's encoding, and then we can fold it up and file it away. Now, the next step is rehearsal, because the thing is, if we just file it once, we need some way to remember where we filed that information away. We need some kind of an index, like a library index card that'll help us find that later. And the process of rehearsal is what helps us retrieve that information. It helps build those connections so that we have a strong idea of where to find that information. So it's like writing new index entries in our big mental catalog of all the information that we know. And every time we take that information out again and add new stuff to it and review the stuff that's already there and then refile it, that's rehearsal. And then lastly, when we need to pull that information out and use it, that's recall. And there's two kinds of recall. There's cued recall, and we talk about this a lot more in depth in the book. I'm giving you the super bare bones right here. There's cued recall, which is where if I were to tell you the mitochondria is what? And there's a part of your brain that remembers that phrase from 7th grade biology class that says the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. Or if I said in 1492 and you finished with Columbus sailed the ocean blue, that's cued recall. I give you a cue and you recall that information. The other kind, which is really the more ideal form of recall, is called free recall. Free recall is when I say, so tell me about mitochondria. And then because of all of your experiences with reading about it, having discussions about mitochondria, doing a hands-on science project and building a model cell out of Jell-O, meeting someone who had mitochondrial disease and seeing how it affected their lives, all of those experiences enable you to just talk freely and tell me everything you know about mitochondria. So that's free recall as opposed to cued recall. Now, the lovely thing about free recall is that that tells us that we really know the information. Cued recall means we understand how to respond to that cue. It doesn't necessarily mean we know how to use it. So that whole big process of stimulus, paying attention to just a portion of that, taking that working knowledge and combining it with our prior learning, and then reviewing it and recalling it in a meaningful way, that's pretty much how all of us learn. There's the myth that we all learn differently carries with it the idea that everybody has such a unique way of learning and way of approaching information that all curriculum and all lesson plans and every educational experience has to be super duper customized to the particular child or it won't do any good. And that's really just not true. We all learn a little bit differently because we have different things that we like to pay attention to. We have different past experiences and knowledge, that prior knowledge that we bring to the table. But the process of learning is basically the same. So that brings us to myth number 2. Myth number 2 is that you have to match your student's modality in order to get better academic achievement. Matching your student's modality leads to higher academic achievement. Now, what matching your student's modality actually leads to is higher engagement, which is not the same thing as achievement. And I'll give you an example of how this works in just a second. The truth is that our learning modalities, and when I say modality, what I mean is our preferred method of communication. It's our preferred way of receiving new data. And these are the 3 or 4 common modalities that you've probably heard before. You've probably heard visual learners, kinesthetic learners, auditory learners, and you might even have heard a 4th one, read-write learners. Some models use that. And those are what are called modalities. And really what they are learning preferences. There are preferred methods of communication. So the myth is that if you teach a visual learner using visual stimuli, they'll be able to do better on their tests. If you teach an auditory learner with kinesthetic stimuli, they'll perform worse because they didn't get the information in their preferred modality. So here's what the science and the research actually shows. You can match modalities, and that's a perfectly fine thing. And what it leads to is higher engagement, which means that students are more motivated if you're presenting them information in their favorite way. And some students are multimodal, so they might have more than one preference. Like you might be both visual and kinesthetic, and both of those motivate you. And that's great. It makes things easier for the teacher if you've got lots of different ways to be motivated. The studies that they've shown have not been able to link teaching to their preferred modality with higher academic achievement. Like there's just not a strong enough correlation between those two to say one leads to the other. Now, the idea that is supportable is that if you teach to their preferred learning modality, they're more likely to engage and be motivated to engage, which if, and this is a big if they're studying properly and using good study skills and studying the right information, might lead to better performance on a test. But that's not a straight line. You can be highly motivated, but if you study the wrong information or you learn the information in such a way that you get the gist of it, but you're fuzzy on the details and you just rehearse the core parts that are still fun, but the outside application and the broader perspective you don't study, that's not going to lead to higher performance. So they're really useful to know what your students' modalities are, but it's not the magic cure-all that a lot of people have made them out to be. And the truth is that no matter what our preferred modality is, we can still learn in modalities that are not our preference. So if I'm a visual learner and you present me with auditory information, I'm still able to learn that. I just have to work a little bit harder to be self-motivated to engage with that information. And that's a very, very different proposition. So we can all learn in multiple modalities. We just might have to work a little bit harder on our own internal motivations, which means that there's a time, as teachers, we need to have this as part of our philosophy of education, there's a time to match our students' preferred modalities and a time to mismatch them. And my personal perspective here is that if I have a student who's already highly motivated in a topic, let's say I have a visual learner and they're highly motivated in history. They love history. It's their favorite subject. They just want to dig into it more and more and more. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to present them information in a non-preferred modality. I might give them auditory information. And the reason for that is I want my students to be able to have practice interacting with material that's not their favorite way to learn. I want them to have to struggle a little bit sometimes because we learn more when we struggle than when something is really easy for us. So that's what I call flexing, where I make their brains work a little bit harder. I'm using a subject that they're already motivated in and giving them a little bit of a modality challenge. That's flexing. Now, mapping or matching, if I have a student who is demotivated in a subject, I can map to their preferred modality to help their motivation and just to remove one more barrier. Because if they're demotivated, it's going to be real hard for them to learn anything. That's just how motivation works. So if I have a kid who hates math and they're a real kinesthetic learner, it makes sense for me to try and find a kinesthetic-based math curriculum to help them with their motivation issue. It's not that they can't learn from something else, it's that they've already they've already got a barrier there. They're demotivated, they dislike the subject. So I don't want to make it any harder than it has to be to get them to engage in the material. So there's a time to map. If they're already demotivated, we want to map or match their preferred learning style. And there's a time to flex if they're already highly motivated and we want to give them more of a challenge and to stretch their skills. So the myth is that you have to teach to their preferred learning style, but the truth is that their preferred learning modality will result in higher engagement, not necessarily achievement, although that might come, but that they can learn in whatever modality you present, and you can use their preferred modalities as a tool to help motivate them as needed. So that's myth number 2. Myth number 3, and I know I'm going through all this real quick. There's a lot more, a lot more detail in the book. Myth number 3 is that our talents define us. And the truth is that talents may be inborn, but anyone can grow a skill. And further, that we can grow our skills far beyond our talents. So this touches on another learning styles model called Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences. And you may have heard multiple intelligence theory out there. There's 9 different intelligences that Gardner has proposed, things like linguistic intelligence, mathematical intelligence, visual spatial intelligence, musical intelligence, interpersonal intelligence, intrapersonal intelligence, naturalistic intelligence, and spiritual existential intelligence. I think that's all of them. I might be forgetting one. All of those intelligence represent different areas of our brain. This is part of Gardner's criteria, is they have to be able to identify and solve a unique set of problems, and they have to have a specific area of the brain that controls that kind of problem solving. So this idea of we all have different skills, we have different abilities, we have different talents, those 3 words, skills, talents, and abilities, we kind of muddle them together in English. We don't necessarily make a distinction between them, but I think the distinctions are really important. Talent is something that's inborn, which is to say it's a part of our brain, one of those intelligences that is more developed even from infancy. It's a part of our brain where we have a natural inclination or an inborn advantage in working with that particular set of problem-solving skills. A skill, on the other hand, is different than an inborn talent. A skill is something that we can grow in and learn and get better at through deliberate practice. Now, what the research finds is that all of our intelligences, we all have different intelligence levels. You know, some person might be really interpersonal and have great people skills. Another person might be highly musically intelligent or mathematically intelligent. All of those are great, but no matter what our starting set of high intelligence scores is, we can grow any of them. We can grow all of them if we're willing to put in the work and the effort to practice, grow, and learn. So, you know, we think about someone like Mozart, who is this incredible composer and was composing things from the time he was 4. And we think, oh, wow, a child prodigy, he had so much talent. And while certainly I'm sure he had a fair bit of talent, the bigger deal in his musical development was having a father who literally wrote the book on how to play the violin and taught his son from the time he could hold a bow how to play and how to be a fantastic musician. That was skill developed through hard work, even more than it was talent. And we see the same thing in things like the Suzuki schools. You know, out in Asia, they've got these Suzuki method schools where they teach very small children amazing musical skills, and you find people who can play, you know, the cello or the violin with just outstanding concert level performance skills before they're teenagers. And what that shows us is not that, oh wow, all of the people going to that school must be insanely talented. What that should show us is, oh wow, all of these people putting in all of these hours of study and practice and listening to music so much and being exposed to it and learning and spending all of that time in hard work, get really good at it. So our talents, they really don't define us. They're a starting advantage, but our skill growth through hard work and dedication and perseverance and grit, and having a growth mindset, our skill growth can far outpace our talents. And the reason why this is a problematic myth is because a lot of times we'll encourage our children to pursue their talents with the assumption that their talent will carry them through and allow them to do whatever they need to do. And because of that, highly talented children often find that when they meet their first real challenge that their talent is not enough to overcome, they get discouraged or they quit because they haven't learned how to put in the hard work and effort to grow a skill beyond what their talent level provides for them. So if they reach a challenge and their talent, if the challenge is here, but their talent only comes up to here, and they're not ready to put in the hard work to grow the skill to meet the challenge, then they've got a serious problem. And a lot of times they'll have a crisis of identity. And then forget, if it's artistic or musical, they might just drop it entirely because their talent didn't get them as far as they wanted to go. When what they could do is put in the hard work and keep learning and keep getting better until their skill surpasses their challenge. So our talents are great, but they're just starting blocks. And we want to make sure that our children, whether they feel like they're talented in an area or not, recognize the fact that they can grow, they can get better, and they can overcome challenges, even in areas where they don't show a lot of natural talent. If you have a kid who just feels really uncomfortable drawing anything because they don't think they have any artistic talent, well, the thing about drawing is that it's a skill. It's not a talent, or not just a talent in any case. You can learn the skill of drawing through study and trial and error. There's going to be plenty of error, just like any skill. But a kid who thinks, oh yeah, I can't draw at all, well, they may not be able to yet, but if they want to, they can. And we need to be real careful as we're encouraging our children not to pigeonhole them into their talents, and to make sure that they understand areas where you're weak, you can grow in. And areas where you're already strong, you're still going to need to work if you want to get better at them. So these are just three of the myths that we delve into in much more detail in the book, Demystifying Learning Styles. All of us learn in unique ways. Your student needs you to teach to their preferred modality, and our talents define us. These all have, like I said, that grain of truth, which is just enough to get us into some trouble. So I hope that this has been helpful for you, and if you want to learn more, I'd like to offer you a couple of coupon codes. The first is DLS15, which you can use at brightideaspress.com. And that'll give you 15% off the Demystifying Learning Styles book, whether that's your paperback or an ebook copy. That'll expire 1 week from today. And just so you know, if you buy anything at the Bright Ideas Press store today or tomorrow, everything is 15% off on sale right now, and you don't even need a coupon code. But if you go past tomorrow before you buy, you can use this coupon code to get 15% off the Demystifying Learning Styles book. And then another coupon code for you is going to be FB free REG, so Facebook free registration. And if you are interested in taking a class at our online academy, you can get free registration at Bright Ideas Press's online academy. Again, this also expires in 1 week. There's a whole bunch of fantastic classes with really great teachers on all different subjects for middle school and for high school. So I hope you'll check those out, and that's academy.brightideaspress.com. I hope you've enjoyed this, and if you have any questions, feel free to give me a buzz at the at the 877-492-8081 number, or you can email me, tyler@brightideaspress.com, or connect with us on Facebook. Love to chat with you. All right, so we're going to call it a night, and I'll talk to you another time. Take care.